balancing your assessment when they set their goals for the upcoming year. So for instance, in this area, let's say the employee who improved his or her speaking through joining Toastmasters, last year they would have felt that their communication value needed some development. Now, maybe you've seen them really work on that, really progress. You would say that's now a developed value for them. They've really put in the time, they've put in the effort. That's something that's now could be considered developed. On the other hand, though, they considered their need for the community value to be developing. They haven't really met that. They're still where they were last year. So you'll want to make sure that that's being rated as still developing. And then that gives you, again, the visual cue for that conversation to say, you're still where you were last year. This is an area that you may want to think about as far as adding your goals or building on them for the coming years if the employee isn't doing that. And again, getting back to that honest assessment, this is to help identify weaknesses and strengths for further development. So if your employees aren't using it with being critical with themselves and fairly critical, obviously, the tool's not going to be as useful for them. They're not going to see as much growth potential from the tool as a guide if they're not using it very honestly with themselves. And this also allows comparison within your departments for group development activities and for succession planning. So because you have this easily referenced visual tool, you can look for trends within your department that are a little bit easier than reading through a narrative and trying to pick out things. So if, for instance, if you see that, more than half of your employees have communication or some other value that they're low on, that there's all in the developing area, maybe you want to give Daisha a call and say, hey, do we have any professional development around communication we can do for a group? Get my whole team together and work on that. Or maybe there's a lot of conflict in your department, and you're seeing that a lot of people are sort of developing in that people area. That just gives you an idea that your instincts were right as a supervisor, and here's something that you might want to work on to help address some of those issues. So just to sort of talk through 2 examples of the values, just to give you a sense of how the definitions sort of fit in relation to the rating definitions. With access, so we said before, a model employee under access is someone who consistently ensures access to higher education by offering clear pathways to academic success and transformative opportunity for diverse populations. So this is someone who, either in the classroom or outside of the classroom, is doing everything every day, 100%, to make sure that there are pathways, there are no obstructions to somebody getting an education and successfully completing a degree or a certificate or whatever they're here. This is someone in financial aid who, every time a student comes in, they have all the information that student could need. They're making sure that their forms are filled out. They're processed immediately. They never fail to do that. Someone in the classroom who is well-versed in every possible learning style, can switch styles depending on who they're talking to, just is an ideal, perfect instructor. Someone who's developed in access, this is someone who really tries to promote access to higher education at all times. They're offering those clear pathways to academic success, and they may not always be 100%. Sometimes they may focus a little bit too much on one person in a classroom, and somebody else may slip through the cracks, or they may not always be able to answer questions when somebody comes in to get some information on a program. But for most part, they are usually always there. If they're developing, this is an employee sometimes promotes access to higher education, but this individual may not have developed the tools necessary to be consistent. They understand the concept. They understand why access is important and how to do it, but they may sometimes feel swamped. They may, prioritize to help, one person and other people. They just may need some more training on how to manage their time in order to better deal with stresses that create obstacles for them in performing their role. Someone who's underdeveloped in access, this is someone who actually has some difficulty promoting access to higher education. They probably just lack the tools necessary, and they may not even really understand the concept. Someone who's making a transition from industry to higher education may really need some extra help developing that understanding between what it takes to get the job done in the real world versus what it takes to get the job done in our world. And this is not necessarily someone who is malicious about it, but they just need more coaching and more training and more opportunities to be able to learn how to do it. And then not established, this is someone that we really hope we don't have on campus. This is someone whose behavior actually creates barriers to higher education. Someone who doesn't want to answer a question from a student, or if someone comes in to learn about a program, they just say, hey, this is not my area. You're going to find the right person to talk to. This is someone who just is actually resulting in losses of opportunities for students coming on campus. So the next one's communication, and this one's probably, we can see this a lot more easily with everybody, or with individuals, since we're always communicating, but someone who's modeling communication, they're always communicating effectively, they're open, they're proactive, they're very able to get in front of a problem, resolve it before anybody even knows it's a problem. Their communication is equally strong depending on, no matter who they're talking to. So whether it's a member of the trustees, somebody who's just graduating from high school and coming onto campus the first time to learn about our programs, their peers, individuals from other departments, they're always a strong communicator. Someone who's developed in communication, they're typically just as effective. They're getting things done, they're able to communicate easily, they don't have a lot of issues with communicating between different groups, but they may have some strengths with certain groups over others. In most cases, though, they're getting their job done efficiently. Someone who's developing their communication value, this is someone that usually and often they're effective, proactive, and open, but there may be some minor efficiencies. There may be some miscommunications. They may know what they want to say and they know the idea and they think you're following them a little more easily than you actually are, but they're clearly comfortable maybe communicating with certain groups over others. So this results in the occasional ineffective communication for them. Someone who's underdeveloped, this is an individual whose communication is rarely effective. It's rarely open, it's usually not proactive. They can be really confusing. They can actually result in tasks not being done well if they ask somebody for help, but they don't ask directly, and they just assume that people understand what they're doing, or if you've ever spoken to somebody who talks in codes and they hint at what they want to do, I'm actually guilty of that myself. I'm really big on, we should do this, meaning, why don't you check into that and let me know if we can get that done? Which is actually a lot more common than you would think. But this person is also possibly uncomfortable communicating with most other groups. They're very comfortable within their department, but if it comes time to talk to a VP or talk to somebody from another department, they just don't really get the job done. And then of course, somebody who's not established in communication, they just absolutely don't demonstrate any ability to communicate. So again, it's not somebody who you're really ever going to see with respect to values, but understanding there may be somebody who you just want that as a baseline. All right, so at this point we're just going to walk through a quick demonstration of how to fill out this form, or what it looks like as you go through the process. So we've just really been talking about the form, but this is the actual document that you'll receive. And we start here at the second side. This is where all of the employees are going to start with the cycle, as I mentioned before. And once that employee has given some thought to what areas, what values they want to work on for the upcoming year, then they'll come up with whatever goals they think are appropriate for what they want to achieve and where they want to go. So assuming that the individuals you've already had the conversation with them as far as whether their goals are appropriate, whether they work with where they want to go with their professional development, what would you say is a good goal for somebody who's, let's say, been here for about 2 years, they're still, right now they're developing as far as access goes. What do you think would be a good goal for them to further develop their access value. Kathy?
This just came up this week, so in open enrollment classes, trying to get to know all of the departments within the college that might be able to feed employees into our programs. So making those connections to get students into certain types of programs. So they've got to learn about our veterans representative and the Welcome Center and Basic Skills Plus and things like that. Okay,
that's good. That's good. I mean, that's something we could all do more of, get out there and do that. All right, when do you think would be an appropriate time? Let's say
yesterday.
Okay, all right. And let's actually make that goal a little bit more clear. Let's set a goal for them of meeting somebody from 4 other departments before. What do you think? What would be fair, giving them a deadline for that?
I'd say 90 days, because we have to work into other people's schedules.
Okay, so we're going to ask them to get these goals to us in August, when they come back from summer in August. So, actually for the target date, let's say, let's give them by the end of November, November 30th.
Since that's when we're going to get the.
All right. Any other access goals? Do we want to give them a communication goal?
They would need good communication skill to be able to do that. So.
Okay. So let's say right now they're developed. They're a decent communicator. What would you recommend for them to strengthen that communication even more?
We do a lot of verbal communication, so better record keeping of interactions with those 4 different groups of people. So we do a lot of verbal communication, and some people are better at notes than others. So we have to go back and refer to notes that we take, since we have so many communication opportunities. So I would say developing their written communication and record keeping skill.
Okay, so you had mentioned some people are better at that note taking than others. So maybe having this employee sit down and work with one of those stronger note takers to sort of get their best practices and come up with some ways to model what they do. Okay. And when would you like to see that done?
That would need to be done before they actually sit down with the first group.
Okay. So maybe ask them to do that by the middle of September?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now it's, you've set them free. They've established their goals. It makes sense for them. They want to develop. They want to become stronger in your area and become a more effective employee in what they're doing right now. So they have their goals, and they spend the next few months into the spring working on those goals. At that time, they will meet back with you, said end of March, early April, and you'll start filling in the first side of the sheet. Would go to the other? No, the other side of the PowerPoint, yeah.
Here we go.
So now at this point, yeah, but
On the previous sheet, so who's developing the goals? I thought the employees developed these goals. Are we developing for them, or are they?
they
are
are
we in
developing the goals,
conjunction?
but since we don't have any employees here, I was just asking for your feedback.
Well, no, yeah,
And I mean, you'll be doing this too, so.
for myself,
Yes.
my supervisor. My employees are to do these
Exactly.
themselves. Okay.
Exactly, yeah, so they're developing the goals, but as a facilitator of the process, I want you to really work with your employees and make sure that, like I was just saying with Kathy, like how many people do you want this person to work with? And let's refine that a little bit, make it a little more specific. And I'll have some more information about the goal setting, the SMART goals and things like that, and the manual that's going to come out after this. But Yeah, I mean, you want to have a conversation with them and make sure that, you know, they're not going too easy on their goals, or, you know, the goals are just not appropriate for what they're doing or where they want to go. So, yeah, so it is a conversation. So let's say in the spring, you talked to them about their access and they were able to meet with 3 of the individuals. So at that time, you'll make note that, okay, they met with 3 of the 4 people they planned to meet with. You know, what did they learn from those 3 people? You know, what did they incorporate into their day-to-day role? You know, how is it strengthened what they're doing? What was the development outcome, basically? And then with that or the 4th person, what happened with that meeting? Was it they weren't able to make it? Was scheduling just always an issue and they just never followed up? You know, what happened there, and is it worth rolling that over into the next year as an additional goal, or has something changed that goal just isn't the right one anymore? And then you'll do the same thing with communication. You know, were they able to meet with that individual? How's their note-taking improved? You know, what does that mean now? What's the next step? Where do they want to take that next?
Just a thought. Will this somehow also tie in, for example, note-taking? Most everybody uses some sort of electronic device. Would this be maybe a way, I remember on an old evaluation where if someone needed a particular tool in order to meet a goal that they had, would this be something we could transition into equipment requests for everything? This is one of their goals, and in order to meet this goal, they need an iPad or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, and I think that just goes for anything. If it's necessary for you to do your job, you know, I think Starlene's a good person to ask.
Yeah, but I mean, it would still have to go through the budget process
Right.
for her people.
Of
Right.
course.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This doesn't become the budget process.
I know that, but
Emily, is there a fund for that?
evidence, it becomes evidence.
That's
It
right,
becomes
you have
evidence. It becomes evidence. Maybe there's a note in there, and, you know, we're gonna teach them, send them to iPad school or something.
Yeah. So, okay, so then at this same time, you're also going to have the top portion. And this one's a little bit more filled out than the example before, but as you can see, you know, with this individual, previously, you know, their access was set as, this individual, the access was set as developed. Maybe they started as underdeveloped. But they met with these individuals. You're now seeing that their access is a little bit stronger. They're now able to, they made these connections that make them more effective in what they're doing. They're better able to promote access for students who are coming in. So now you can move them up to the developed. You know, in your view, they've developed that value. They've really strengthened it. So you feel confident that they've really worked and they've improved that. You know, let's say, you know, some of the other areas, you know, maybe what they've done, you know, based on what they said in your conversation in this area, you know, they said that, yeah, you know, they've improved their note-taking, you know, they're much better at that. But the product that you're seeing doesn't really bear that out. You know, they're still not, their notes still really aren't as clear as you need them to be. So keeping them here in this developing area, that gives you the opportunity to kind of have that conversation and help them see what the mismatch is that you're seeing, and they think they've really improved in their communication. You're not really seeing it so much. This is where you see them right now. Then they can take that and their self-assessment down here and set their goals for the next year. And then the process just cycles continually. I'm just gonna stop right here because there have to be some questions at this point. So let me, however I can clarify this for you, please let me know. Please ask me what the confusing parts of this are. For me, I'm really comfortable with this. It makes perfect sense, but I'm going to, I want you to be very clear before you leave.
So technically, for new employees, like I have 2 brand new ladies, even though everybody's starting from scratch, you know, previously we've all had evaluations. So they're really starting from scratch. So their development goals there'll be nothing in place other than what we set up for them when going through the 2 processes.
Right. What would you want to have set up?
But no, I'm just saying in terms of the skills, other than what we might have put on the job, you know, when we
Right.
set out to hire them.
Right, and I think for most people, that's something that you're going to have to establish that baseline, even for employees who've been here for years, because we haven't necessarily looked at employees through the
In
lens
this
of the
manner.
values before, right?
And I wondered too about an employee that's new like that, and we've got not established, they come from an environment totally different than what the college does. They started a month before we did this. They're obviously not gonna have that skill set established, but the way that that's written, it almost sounds like,
Why did we hire you?
yeah, why did we hire you, you know?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier, though. We all have these values. You know, all of us can communicate. You know, we all understand, you know, access. You know, we understand that if people come to us, no matter what industry we're in, if they come to us for our service or our good, we have to allow them to have it. So, you know, in some way, we do all have each of these values. Where we get into with the underdeveloped, developing, and developed, it's just to what degree we have it.
A new employee could be all developing.
They
For
could,
everybody.
yeah, they could. And really, quite frankly, a long-term employee could be developing on all those areas. Getting back to the non-punitive nature of this, that's not saying that they're a bad employee. It's just saying that, you know, with regard to these values, maybe they've focused on other things while they're here on campus, but as part of our strategic plan, we've said that as a college, we value these 9 characteristics. So as part of this professional development, or this development guide, we want to try to get everybody focused on those 9 areas and develop in those 9 things. So as a campus, we can all kind of bring ourselves, we can all sort of develop in the same direction. We're all aligned in our development.
On the employee develops their goals, do they come up with a time frame as well?
I would say yes, and if, you know, that's another opportunity for you if the time frame is too lenient or too aggressive, you know, that's an opportunity for you to sort of guide them in a different direction if you feel based on your assessment of their abilities, they may want to rethink that time frame. But no, most of this is really going to be driven by the employee with input from you. And really your input should be guiding them, facilitating their ideas, helping them refine